Okay, this next couple sections we're going to be dealing with fractions. And before we deal with fractions with variables, I'd like to remind you how to add and subtract with just numbers. So no calculators. I'm going to try to show you the easiest way to do these fractions, remind you of some old skills, and maybe teach you kind of a little bit different way of looking at this. So basically, on your notes, what you want to remember for adding and subtracting is we must get a common denominator. So again, what does common mean in math? It means the same. So when we're looking at a fifth and thirds, the easiest way to get a common denominator is just to multiply the two denominators together. So if I multiply 5 times 3, I'll get a 15. So my common denominator should be a 15. And what you want to do is think of, okay, I have this 5. How do I make a 5 equal to 15? So I'll need to multiply that by a 3, which means you have to multiply the top by 3. So I'll change that to 6/15. And if I do that same thing with this second fraction, 3 times 5 is equal to 15. And 4 times 5 will be equal to 20. So when I get a common denominator, the first thing you do is change the fractions. And so now I'll add the numerators and I'll get 26. To reduce that into a mixed fraction, we'll take 15 goes into 26 one whole time with 11/15 left over. And again, let me remind you how I changed that from a mixed fraction. You take 15, goes into 26 one whole time, subtract that, and we get 11. This becomes your numerator. This becomes your denominator. So look at that. Make sure you got all your notes before you go to the next problem. The next problem, well, we want to talk about a common denominator first. So again, a common denominator is we could multiply the denominators together and get 32. But let's talk about the least common denominator. So is there a number that 8 and 4 will both go into? Hopefully you'll answer that question with yes, and it is an 8. So in this problem, there's no need to change the 1/8. We're going to change the 4, multiply by 2, multiply by 2. What do we do with this negative sign? We'll just make that negative 14. Because a negative 7 times 2 is equal to negative 14. Now we add the numerators. We get a negative 13/8. Let's change this. When we change a mixed fraction, we'll take 8 into 13 is one whole time. We subtract, we get a 5. So mixed fraction, 8 goes into 13 one whole time with 5/8 left over. And since this is a negative, then our final answer will be a negative. You try number 3. Subtractions are the same rule. Again, if you think you can do 3 on your own, hit pause, then hit play and see if you come up with the right answer. Problem number 4 is a little different because you may see or you may not see the 2 as a fraction, the common denominator there. The 2 has a denominator of 1. So the common denominator, the easiest common denominator is a 4. Why? Because 1 times 4 is 4. So the 7, we don't need anything for the 7. A minus minus is a plus. So let's change that to a plus 7. And then how am I going to change 2 over 1 to fourths? Think of, again, I want to multiply the bottom by 4, which means I need to multiply the top by 4. So I'll get 8 fourths plus 7 fourths is how many fourths? 15 fourths. The mixed part of this is 4. Again, think about 4 going into 15. That would go 3 times. And when we subtract to get the remainder, we'll have 3/4 as our fractions. So this number becomes your numerator. This is your big number on front, and the number on the outside is always your denominator. Working with mixed numbers and adding, there's a first step, and the first step we must change to improper fractions first. So improper fractions, what do we do when we have a big number and a fraction? To change to improper, we multiply these numbers together and add the numerator. So 1 times 4 is 4, plus 1 would give us 5/4. Plus, let's do that same thing with this mixed number. So 2 times 6 is 12, plus 1 would be 13/6. Now we're in a situation that we want to get a common denominator. So again, think of common denominators as the least common. 24 is a common denominator, but 12 is the least common denominator because 4 goes into 12 and so does 6. So how am I going to change this 4 to 12? I'm going to multiply by 3. So I would get a 15. How do I change a 6 into 12? I'll multiply by 2. 13 times 2 is 26. So we've got a common denominator. We will add the numerators together. 15 and 26 is 41/12. But again, your final answer you'll write now as a mixed. So 12 goes into 41 3 whole times, which will give us 36. So we have 3 whole times. Do a little subtraction, and 5/12 will be our final answer. So try 6. Okay, so again, if we're looking at this time, we have subtraction, but we have mixed numbers. So 4 times 7 is 28, plus 3 is 33/7. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12/5. Common denominator here is 30/5. So we'll need to multiply by 7, and here we'll need to multiply by 5. So 33 times 5, we'll have 165. I wrote a plus, but it really should have been a minus. Minus 12 times 7 is 84. So now we have a common denominator of 35. Let's subtract this 165 and 84 to give us 81/35. Again, changing back to mixed, 35 goes into 81 2 whole times. That would give us 70, and 81 minus 70 is 11/35 for our final answer. You can see by looking at the rest of the notes, it has some geometry involved. So I want to take a minute and give you some formulas for these, and then I'll show you how we plug it into our calculator. So volume of a cone the formula is pi r squared h all over 3, where pi is 3.14, or you'll see that on your calculator. R is the radius, and H is the height of your cone. Surface area of a cone is equal to pi r times r squared plus h squared, and if you take the square root of that whole thing, you'll get the surface area. And finally, a volume of a sphere is 4/3 pi r cubed. So take out your calculator, punch these, I'll give you final answers, and see if they compare with what you got when you punched it out. Hit pause, get your calculator out, and punch. I forgot to give you the surface area formula for number 9. Surface area is 4 pi r squared. And then I'll show you the answers that you should have gotten when you punch those out. So take out your calculator, see if you can get 7, 8, and 9. And finally 10 as your final answers. Again, make sure that you put your units in there, check your units, and see how those are with square units or cubic units.